Hey folks, it's Fernando doing a video for the Modern Survivalist. In this case, we're going to be looking at how to make two very simple, very quick, very cheap, yet very functional knife sheaths. Now the first one, as you see, is a duct tape sheath. Yes, I'm kind of embarrassed, but it is what it is. Several years ago, I had my new busty knife. I needed a sheath, just needed to find a solution for that, and I did a duct tape sheath. How you do this could not be any easier. The thing I did was this: with an empty cereal box, I opened up the cardboard of the cereal box, and then I lined the cereal box with strips of tape. So once I had the lined cardboard with duct tape, I wrapped it around the blade and then closed it up with some more duct tape. Folded it here. You know, it gets quite thick, but that's the idea, so as to avoid getting cut and the knife cutting through. With a little bit more lined cardboard, I did the belt loop, some creativity, and that's it. The only thing that I'm thinking about doing now is maybe a little bit more duct tape here, a little bit over the handle, so as to have a little bit more friction and have some actual retention. But the truth is that I've had this for several years. I've used this quite a bit, and you know what? It's still working. It's still functional, and it's better, much better than not having a sheath at all. That's all there is to it. Just using some duct tape and some old piece of cardboard, maybe some plastic, something else, but couldn't be any easier. Now the second one that I have, I'm a little bit more proud of, which is this nice leather sheath. And the thing is this: I've been thinking about doing a nice leather sheath for some time. In fact, every time I looked at this one, I told myself, you know, you actually have to get your act together and do a nice sheath. Now the thing is, looking at different YouTube videos and such, yes, it's not that hard, but it's quite more complex than it seems at first. Leather working, especially the tools involved, the skills. Now eventually I said, okay, enough is enough. You actually have to make this sheath for this new knife that I had, and I did it. Now the method that I used could not be any easier. If I did it, you can do it yourself. It's the only thing you need is just a piece of leather, enough leather so as to do the sheath. Yes, I did get this little kit with different tools, but the only thing I ended up using was the wax thread, and you can use any other thick thread that you have. In fact, you could even use waxed dental floss, could be used as well if you don't have anything else. But yeah, the only thing you really need is the actual leather. About 2-3 millimeters thick is what you're looking for. I bought this buffalo hide, which I just bought because it was the cheapest piece of leather I came across. And how you do it is very simple. You just need, basically, you're going to be doing 3 layers of leather. You have the top one, the bottom one, and in between you have this welt, which is the one that keeps your knife from cutting through the stitches. So I didn't even use a template for this, which is pretty basic stuff. What I did was just place a knife on top of my piece of leather, left like about half a centimeter, like 5 millimeters on each side for the stitches, and cut the bottom strap, right about, let's say, about there, right? So I cut that, which is this bottom one that you see here. Now with that bottom strap of leather cut and somewhat shaped, I folded this section here. The thing is, when leather gets wet, it folds easier, and then when it dries up, it retains that shape. So what I did was, just with a little bit of water wet, making it soak here in this part, I folded this part like so and placed a couple of these clips, which are very useful for this project. You probably have some of these in your desk around some part. So with a couple of these, I fold it like that and let it dry. Meantime, I was preparing my top strap of leather. What I did was wrapping the blade with some plastic film, because you're going to be getting this top strap of leather wet. You know, cutting it to shape somewhat similar to the bottom one, but leaving a little bit more space because it gets wider here. So being a little bit more generous with the top strap of leather, I soaked it in water, you know, actually placing it under the faucet. What am I doing here? So with a top strap of leather wet, soaked in with water, I just pressed it with my fingers around the shape of the knife. So especially in this part, which is the one that I was most interested in, I press it like that. Then I place, a hair dryer right on top of the table, pointed in my direction as I kept my fingers pressed like that a little bit. And then it just adapts nicely because it's really is softer when it's wet. So I let it dry with a knife on top, with a leather on top of the knife, with a hair dryer pointing in that direction. And while that was happening, what I did here was start with a gluing and stitching. So this had dried up enough, and what I did was right there where I have the stitching here, I was going to be gluing this part first. So I opened it up a little bit, sanded the surfaces where I was going to be putting the contact cement, the glue on both sides, then pressed it, used a few more clips, let it dry a little bit. Once that was dry, once the glue was dry, with a little hand drill and the smallest drill bit that I had, maybe 1 millimeter wide, I drilled a few holes. Once I had that, I measured the thread that I was going to be using, which for this distance is 4 times this distance. So I measured 4 times this distance and cut it with an end nut. And I started threading with my needle in one direction, and then when I was done, back the same way through the same holes, so as to do both sides. In this case, what I did was I did a little bit I cut a little bit into the leather, making it like a shallow groove for the threads to sink into, especially this part, because I didn't want to cut those threads when putting the knife. So a little bit of a shallow groove there, and then you hammer the stitches so that they go deeper into the leather. This gave me a nice even surface. So yeah, flush with the surface of the leather. Once I had that, I already had the bottom part ready, and I cut the welt, which it was going to be gluing, yes, about 5 millimeter wide, give or take, like so. So I cut this, and with the clips, I glued it all around. I glued it, sanding it first, the surface that it's going to be applying the glue to. I sanded for the glue to hold on better to the leather, sanding it a little bit, then putting the contact cement on both sides, then placing it, and with several clips, keeping that in place. While that was drying up, I prepared the top part that I already molded and dried with this shape that I was looking for. And once that I had that done, I placed it on top, glued it again, the top part to the welt that I now had placed on the glue to the bottom strap of leather. And with more clips, keeping everything in place, I waited for that to dry. Once that was dry as well, I drilled the holes on either side. I left a little drain hole here in the bottom, so I drilled those holes, and the same thing, 4 times the distance, and not sewing on one direction, a few extra stitches here for reinforcement, back through the same holes to the very end, and then a final knot there for everything in place. I burned that, as you probably see there. I burned those and pressed them, so I had those nicely there. I hammered it a little bit, but I didn't make anything here in terms of sinking those deeper in. Same thing for the other side. Once that was done, with a Dremel tool, I sanded with a Dremel tool on both sides, so as to even up everything there nicely. Now, once that was done with some wax, but you could even use paraffin, some candle wax even, or even some shoe polish, putting a generous amount of that on these sides, and then rubbing it like this, with a handle, a wooden spoon even. You rub it like that, heating it up, and what it does, it gives you like a finish, so that the leather doesn't frail and open up and come apart like you see it there a little bit. So you do that, and that gives you a nice even surface that's finished and not coming apart. And that's basically it. That's all there is to it. The shape, once dried, it just keeps everything in place, and it works quite nicely. I mean, it's not falling off. The nice thing, it's very affordable, it's cheap to do this, and it has that added value of you did it yourself, you did it custom to your needs. I did this left-handed, which was my intention, to the belt that I plan on using it with, exactly the height that I wanted. So all those nice things that come from something of a custom-made job that you do yourself. Folks, I encourage everyone to do this. If you're looking for some more pictures and steps on how to do this, I'm going to be leaving the link below to my website where I have pictures of the process of how I did this, explaining things maybe a little bit better in case you need that. Folks, that's going to be all for now. Remember to subscribe. Take care. See you on our next video.